Welcome everyone to the Conflict Management Skills for Consultants, Coaches, and Advisors. Thank you to CAFA for organizing this conference once again, and thank you to Liz and her team for making all this possible. Thank you to Andrew, who's here with me today in my home to record this session. It's an amazing experience. It's my first time doing a recorded session in my home, so we're ready to go here. So I promised that I would talk about conflict management skills and really talking about the latest technologies that we have available to us to deal with conflict, and also an understanding of our biocomputer and what that is and how to update the operating system of our biocomputer. I like these terminologies. They're words that most of us can understand these days, and there's a nice fit to these words and understanding the work that we're doing in conflict resolution and conflict management. So the theories and technologies that I'm going to share with you today, there are several. I'm only going to talk about some of them, some of the main ones. The first one is Theory U by Otto Scharmer, and he's from MIT down in the States. I'm also going to be talking about epigenetics, which is a relatively recent science. I think it's been around for since 2007 was the first time I'd heard about it. We're going to talk about some neuroplasticity. I believe most people are familiar with neuroplasticity these days. Polyvagal Theory by Stephen Porges. Somatic Experience by Peter Levine. Adverse Childhood Experiences. Collective Trauma Integration Practice by Thomas Hübl, and Integral Theory by Ken Wilber. I don't know if you've heard of these people or heard about these concepts. Most of them have been around for quite some time, not in the mainstream, however. In the last few years, and particularly since COVID started, there has been an explosion on the internet with this information. I can't keep up with the number of conferences and webinars that these people are putting out there right now. And they're trying to answer a very important question about who we are and why we are here, and trying to understand the human condition, trying to understand our deepest humanity. What does it mean to be a human being? And also, with the technologies that we have now, we know that with all the mess out in the world that we see right today, we know that we can heal this mess now. And that's exciting news. We've got a lot of work to do. The first theory or technology I want to talk about is Theory U. So Otto Scharmer has done a lot of work in this field, understanding the conflicts and problems that we have in the world, both personally, socially, and even as far as the environment. There's a disconnect between us and our planet. And the way he explains this disconnect is the social pathologies he calls them the economies of destruction. So Theory U is at the bottom half of this slide, but what we're seeing at the top half of the slide is what's happening today. So I'm going to start with what's happening today. So I think most of us can understand when we're downloading, we're getting information. We're hearing stuff and we're taking it in. And how do we deal with that information? So what we see a lot is people are blinding themselves. So there's just this stuck in my perspective. I can't see other people's perspectives. So that's the first stage, is I'm blind to what's going on around me. The second stage is I'm denying it. So emotionally, I just can't feel it. So it's not real for me. And I get really even more entrenched in my perspective, and that's where the us versus them comes in. There's an emotional disconnect or fragmentation. Physically, we even hold on, and we can't physically sense what's going on with other people. So we get more and more isolated in our own self, in our own skin, and this is something that Otto calls absencing. So I'm just not here. I'm in another place. Mentally, emotionally, and physically, I'm just really not here. What this leads to in behavior terms is that we become delusional, we become manipulative, we can become abusive, and even just checking out completely, so aborting this whole operation. We're disembodied. We're not connected to ourselves or others or even planet Earth. And ultimately, we become very destructive. And I think most of us have experienced this on the planet today and in our own personal relationships. So it's on every level that we see this phenomenon of absencing. And what Otto talks about is presencing. So this is where the theory U comes in. So when we download the information, we take it in, from a mental place, we start to open our minds more. So the goal is to see a broader perspective, to see things from a different perspective. So we're suspending our old ideas, we're suspending our old habits, and opening up our minds to new possibilities. From an emotional perspective, we start to open our hearts, so really feeling compassion for others and sensing into what's going on in our physical experience as well. We've got like sensors all over our bodies that we're picking up information constantly. We're not consciously aware of it, but it's happening. So getting more aware of how I'm actually sensing physically what's going on in my experience. Letting go of some actual habits that aren't serving anymore. So just being willing to let go of old habits. And ultimately we get into this place called presencing. And this is a place of stillness where we've got our minds and our emotional state and our physical state calm enough that we can go into a place of stillness and start to listen at a deeper level. And there's an inner voice that we can hear when we get into that place of stillness. Now on the way down that side of the U, we're going to encounter a lot of resistance. We're going to get the voice of judgment from our minds. We're going to get a voice of cynicism, and we're going to get a voice of fear. And we can hear those voices, we can feel them emotionally, and we can actually feel them, sense them physically, because there's a physical impact on those voices as well, or from those voices. So we get down into this bottom of the U that Otto calls presencing. And when we start to listen from that place of stillness, we start to hear things. We get inspiration. We get ideas. We understand potentials. And we say, oh gosh, that's a good idea. I like that. So we get inspired and we start to move in that direction. We start to get some visions, some more concrete ideas. And Otto calls that crystallizing. And eventually, with those crystallized ideas, we'll start to prototype. We'll start to experiment with those crystallized ideas to start to manifest them and put them into practice. Here we have another picture of the U without the upper half of the slide, so we get a better picture of that open mind, open heart, and open will, and really going down into that place of presence where we connect to our source. We connect to that place where we came from, and really seeing where we're going next. Otto calls this the emerging future. And it's a continual process. This is something that we're constantly doing. It doesn't just happen one time. So every time we take in information, we try to broaden our perspective. So opening my mind and opening my heart so I can feel it more, and just going down into that place of stillness and then coming up. So planning in this model isn't fixed. It's a very flexible process where you get an idea, but you're always moving with whatever's coming up. And this is a skill, especially these days, that is very valuable. Otto also talks about leadership effectiveness depends on the interior condition of the leader. So when we recognize that it's actually our inner state that's determining the structures and the systems that I have in my life, either personally or professionally or even on a community level, and that those structures and systems are what are determining the problems and issues and good things as well that we see out in the world, we have to come right back to ourselves if we want to change anything and really work on this inner state. The other thing to be aware of as an advisor or a consultant is that the clients that I have and what's going on with my clients are actually a reflection or a mirror of my own inner state. So whatever's going on in my clients, there's something in me that's creating or attracting that kind of a client. So if there's something that I don't, and that's a good thing. It's not a bad thing. That's a good thing in the sense that if there's something I don't like, it just means there's something in me that I don't understand yet, and it's a learning opportunity. So our clients actually help us grow. So my own physical, emotional, and mental structures and systems are also part of that inner state. So I can have health issues, I can have mental health issues, and I can have relationship issues just for my own inner state. So those systems and structures aren't just with my clients. In order to serve our clients better, it's important that we understand these four quadrants of being in situations of uncertainty and interdependence. A lot of people are in the anxiety zone these days, and they have been for some time, but it seems to be, of course, getting worse, especially with the COVID, the political and economic instability that we're dealing with right now. We've got these accountabilities, we've got responsibilities, and we're trying to accomplish things. There's these motivations to do stuff, but we don't have that sense of psychological safety, which is leading to anxiety. Psychological safety has at least two aspects. One is my inner psychological safety, and one is an external psychological safety. The inner psychological safety is directly connected to that motivation at the bottom of the quadrant. So whatever my motivation is going to determine if I've got the proper accountability structures in place. And everybody's got a different motivation and value system. So we need to understand what our clients' motivations are and make sure that whatever accountability structures fit that. And that motivation is heavily influenced by some other factors that I'll talk to in a minute. So that inner psychological safety is directly connected to that motivation. So when you get clarity about your motivation and you set up the proper accountability for that, then your anxiety is going to lessen. And then there's the external psychological safety, so the environment that I'm working in. So if I'm in a war zone or in a political instability, whatever, that's an external factor that's going to affect my psychological safety that I need to be aware of. But even in a family dynamic situation where I'm in a household where somebody in my household is making me feel nervous, that's an external factor that's going to influence it. So how do we get the clients from the anxiety zone into the learning zone? Oh, first I should talk about the apathy zone. So the apathy zone is, I've lost my motivation, I don't care about accountability, and I'm not safe anyway, so I've kind of just given up. So we can see that in certain sectors of populations. And the comfort zone is where I don't really have a clear motivation or accountability. Nobody's attacking me or anything. I'm not pushing myself, and I'm comfortable. And we can also see that this is what I would call entitlement. We can see this in different areas of the population as well. So I think a lot of us would like to see the learning zone or the high performance zone, but it's important to understand the clarity of motivation and accountability that's required, as well as an internal sense of psychological safety and an external sense of psychological safety. And how do we get them there? How do we get our clients there is we need to meet them where they are. So if they're in the comfort zone or the apathy zone or the anxiety zone, we need to be able to meet them there. We need to help them get clarity about their motivation. We need to have clarity about an accountability structure that fits that motivation. We need to help them understand how to feel psychologically safe so that their nervous system is opening up and creating enough space for that inspiration and potential to manifest itself. And how do we do that? Is we connect with our own biocomputer. I did not create my existence. I am here as a result of at least hundreds of thousands of years of human development. So I've got my mom and my dad, my grandparents, great-grandparents, and every generation before them. I wouldn't be here today if they didn't have some really good survival instincts. But I also need to understand that along with those strengths, there came along with those strengths some baggage. And I don't want to call that baggage weakness, because that baggage kept us alive. We wouldn't be here today without the baggage. We're reaching a point in our development, in our human our understanding of the human condition, where that baggage is becoming too heavy. We can't carry it anymore, and it's having a very negative influence on our health, on our relationships, on our economic and political systems, and on the planet. So what we're learning now is how we can take that baggage and start to use it for something positive, because it's material that we can use. But in order to do that, I need to start to understand what that baggage is and what impact it's having on me today. So I need to understand the life conditions that I grew up in that is influencing my physical, mental, and emotional condition, and it's influencing my relationships. I need to understand what made me the way I am right now, but I also need to understand the physical conditions, the power dynamics, the political situations, religious convictions, financial situations, health and state of mind of my parents and my grandparents and everybody who came before them, for me to really understand what's at play in my system today. Epigenetics is a science that takes a look at that. So we know that our genome, each one of us has a specific DNA. On our DNA, epigenetics talks about something called tags on our DNA. And when those tags are turned on or off, it actually determines if it's that piece of DNA is going to become a lung or part of a lung or part of a heart or a kidney or liver. It also determines some of our behaviors. It also determines how much anxiety we will feel. It also determines the way we think. It also determines the way we sense. And what's happened over the history of humanity is that those tags got turned on and off that are actually influencing the way we perceive everything. The good news is it's plastic. The good news is we can change it. We now know how to do that, and brain science or neuroscience is one way of looking, or one way of understanding epigenetics, but it's also health issues and relationship issues. We can actually change those tags on our DNA. So understanding how those tags get turned on and off, it takes me to something called Polyvagal Theory. And again, in the conflict management world, I think most of us are familiar with the fight, flight, and freeze response. So we know the parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system, that when we're relaxed, our parasympathetic is active, and when we're aroused, our sympathetic is active. When something happens and we get scared and our nervous system takes off, we have to do something. It's our survival instinct. It has kept us alive. We don't want to get rid of that. It will lead to, if we feel strong enough, we will fight whatever it is that's threatening us. If we feel strong enough but not strong enough to fight that, we will run. If we don't feel strong enough, we will collapse. Our whole system, it's a survival instinct just to shut down. We have another nervous system called the vagus nervous system, and that's spelled with an A, not an E. And that's, in polyvagal, it means it's the dorsal vagal and the ventral vagal. And this is our social relationship nervous system. And it was discovered about 20 years ago, and Stephen Porges has been attributed with this theory. This is also part of the human condition, is our need to be in relationship. And what happens in our development when we're growing, even starting in the womb at the point of conception, is our nervous system is developing step by step by step. And our vagus nerve is developing in relation to our environment. So in the womb, we're relating to the mother, and whatever the mother's going through is going to affect the baby. And then when we're born and we start to experience the external world, we start to feel curious. So we'll go out there and we'll learn new things. But when we get scared, our nervous system starts to contract. So we literally have this contraction in our nervous system. What do? We run home to mom or dad or whoever our primary caregiver is, and the adult, if they're available, will help the child calm down. So the adult's nervous system that's in a relaxed or parasympathetic state they may be excited at first, but they very quickly help the child relax their nervous system. This is called co-regulation. So the adult's nervous system co-regulates with the child's nervous system to help the child's nervous system calm down. And over time, as the child grows and starts to explore and experience new things, because curiosity is a basic part of who we are. We're very curious creatures. So we go out to explore, but then we get scared and we come back, and we need to have a way of calming ourselves down. Through this process, eventually of co-regulation, eventually we learn to self-regulate. We actually just figure it out. Say, oh, okay, I know what to do. When I'm scared, I know how to calm myself down. If that process is interrupted, so we don't have an adult or primary caregiver to help teach us how to co-regulate, we end up growing up with a part of our nervous system that just can't do it. There's a malfunction in our polyvagal nervous system. So when we feel scared, instead of going out to relate to somebody and get some help, we'll either fight or we'll pull back and shut down. And you can see this in all kinds of behaviors in children and in adults. And Magdalena Weinstein has created a lovely diagram to show some of these behaviors that we can observe. So the adverse childhood experiences that lead to this, there's a lot of research on this that shows that if you have a certain number of adverse childhood experiences, it will lead to certain behavioral problems as an adult. So things like your parents fighting all the time, divorce, physical, emotional, sexual abuse, parents with addictions, poverty, wars, community violence, all of those things are affecting a child's nervous system. And if they don't have somebody to help them process that, in order to survive, the child literally has to hold all that in. And it just kind of gets pushed down into this dark box of unconsciousness that will come up. It's down there, but it will show up in the behaviors. There's currently a lot of work being done in the US and in Europe about bringing this information about adverse childhood experiences into the education system and into the legal system so that we have trauma-informed teachers and trauma-informed police officers, so that we don't punish people the same way. We hold them accountable, but we help them learn how to self-regulate. The other thing about the nervous system, it's kind of like a lawyer. So as human beings, we have some basic human rights, and that is the right to be here, so it's just the right to be, the right to become and develop into whatever it is we're here to be, and the right to belong in a community. And when those human rights are transgressed, our nervous system is like a lawyer. It knows it immediately. Something's not right, and it reacts. And as children, because we're kind of prisoners of our parents, we can't do too much. So we have to find a way to survive through that. And the healing process is helping bring that part of ourselves back online so that we can be more empowered and deal with transgressions. But if we haven't developed our nervous system properly, we're going to have these other unproductive reactions to things that aren't okay. The other thing I want to mention here is about the physical aspect of these traumas. And there's Peter Levine talks about somatic experience. So when we have these traumatic experiences, it's actually in our physicality. So it's in our bodies. And if you have back pain or headaches or neck pain, all of those things are contractions coming from your nervous system. So your body is still holding on to these childhood experiences. Bessel van der Kolk? Yeah, Bessel van der Kolk. He has a book called The Body Knows the Score, and he has a great... It really speaks to how it's in our bodies. This trauma is just in our physical expression. The next technology I want to talk about is transparent communication. And Thomas Hübl has come up with some wonderful, wonderful ways of explaining trauma and what we can do about it. So now I'm going to use my flip chart, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So transparent communication basically is talking about our biocomputer. And he has a lovely diagram to explain that. So if this is me, this is my biocomputer. So there's my mind, my emotions, and my body. And this P is the presence that Otto Scharmer talks about. So this witnessing of my mind, my emotions, and body. And when we go into the theory U, and we go through that process where I'm aware of what I'm thinking, I'm aware of what I'm feeling, and I'm aware of what I'm sensing physically, there's a witness that is actually observing these things. And I can become aware of the witness. So that's what the presencing is. And when I'm completely in alignment, that I don't have any issues going on, I'm what we call being in the zone or in flow, there's a information that's flowing through my whole system, and you can actually feel it energetically. You feel energized, you feel happy, your mind is clear, and you're excited. And this is where we get our moments of inspiration, our potential is coming when we're in that zone. There's also information coming from my roots here. So this is where we talked about epigenetics earlier. So I've got information in my system coming from my parents, but not just the things that they taught me, but also physically in my DNA. I've got information in this human biocomputer from my parents and my grandparents, etc. So there's information flowing through my system constantly. So that's where we're in the zone. And then we've got another person here, same thing. When they're in the zone and we're in the zone together, we can conquer anything. We've got all kinds of wonderful ideas, and we start to get together and we create things together. What happens is we can't quite get there. And why not? Because there's something interfering. What happens is that, so if this is me and this is another person, and I'm trying to communicate my ideas, I want to go here, but it's not getting there. There's something in the way. And instead of going here, it's going over here. Now you got another person over here, same idea. The information is getting this far, and there's something here, and it's going over here, same thing over here. There's something in the way that's preventing the information from getting to where we want it to go. What is this? What is this that's in the way? And my proposal, and Thomas's proposal, is it's trauma. There's a traumatic experience, because down here, this is our conscious behavior, or our conscious awareness, and this is unconscious. If I spell that right. In our unconscious, there's all kinds of unprocessed life energy that happened when we were growing up or from our ancestors. Unconscious life energy. And down here we've got things that were the child abuse, the adverse childhood experiences. We've got things like the Holocaust. We've got things like genocide. We've got things like misogyny. All of those things that have happened throughout our history are just sitting down there in our unconsciousness. And every once in a while, we'll meet somebody And because of something going on in their history and something in my history, there's a block, and there's something from down here that's showing up in that relationship. So just understanding that is a huge step. So I'm not going to blame the other person. I start to recognize that there's something between us that's preventing us from connecting. When we're in flow, when we're happy and healthy and connecting, we connect with each other. Our minds are understanding each other emotionally. We're understanding each other, and even physically. Our bodies feel good. Like we know that we feel safe and creative physically when we're in flow. When we're not in flow, so if I've got some trauma, so if we put this here, is the unconsciousness here. Unconsciousness, there we go. And it's going to show up in my system here. So I've got an emotional block. So I'm shut off. I cannot feel. This, again, going back to what Otto Scharmer was talking about when we're absencing. I can't feel the other person's emotional state or physically. When we start to become aware of how much we're shut down physically, we can't feel. And even the pain that we experience, there's a contraction there that is preventing me from feeling another person because I'm so involved in my own pain. And of course, mentally, I won't be able to see another perspective because my mind is just closed off from understanding the other person. So we shut it down. And again, this is an intelligent function. We would be dead if we didn't have this capacity to shut down because our nervous systems would be so overwhelmed, we would collapse. So we need this. We need this to protect ourselves. What happens when things start to break through, though, is our system starts to get activated. This is where the stress and the tension starts to show up. Okay? And I think we all know what that feels like, too. This is actually where the hope is. When we start to feel that, we know that there's something here that wants to be integrated into our system. There's something from our unconsciousness that is ready to show up in our consciousness and be integrated into our life experience so that we can start to heal this stuff and let it finish its cycle, because it's an energetic frozenness that needs to be unfrozen and complete its cycle, where it's ready to come in so that it expands our capacity for inspiration and potential. So that's in me. That's what's going on in me. Now, again, it can come from some experience down here or even further in the client or in the other person, but today we're talking about the client. Same thing. They've got issues that is in their history where they can't feel here or they can't see something. But when they're scared, when they have anxiety, so if we've got fear over here or a physical contraction or like pain, if we don't know what's going on in the client, we're gonna feel it anyway. So we'll start to pick up their fear. If we're hypersensitive or really tuned in, we're going to start to pick up that fear and that contraction, and even the thoughts and the thoughts that they have about how could they think that way. Our mind starts to go a little bit wacky over here, like how could they believe that? If we're not consciously aware of what's going on in the client and how it's impacting my own nervous system, I can start to freak out myself. I can start to shut it down or get so anxious that I can't sleep at night. So it starts to have a real impact on me. So this is an important awareness of how we're picking that up through our nervous system. The goal now is, once we understand that, is what to do with it. How can we, as leaders, as consultants, as advisors, how can we deal with this so that we can show up better for our clients? So that we can help them get some better clarity. Well, we have to be clear first. Our inner state has to be in a relaxed place first so that we can create that space and that feeling of safety so that the client's nervous system also starts to relax, so that they can start to see things more clearly and feel things more openly. And even physically, it's about changing their habits, right? The body is how we do stuff. That's the mind, the heart, and the hand, or the head, the heart, and the hand, as Otto says, because he likes to use all the H's. So we start to connect with that. And how do we do that? Is here, the presence. So my presence, or my witness of all this, starts to connect with the client's presence or witness. Okay? So Thomas calls this here, the mind, emotions, and body is the 3 sync. So we start to become aware of what's going on in our minds, and our emotions, and our physical state. And then there's a 4 sync, where we actually bring in the witness. So this is an exercise. This is a practice that we do every day. And understanding that all of these things can be our individual traumatic experiences in our own childhood, our own personal biographies. It can be intergenerational, coming from our parents and grandparents and before. But there's also something called collective trauma. And collective trauma are the things like the Holocaust and the genocide. And any one of our ancestors that was around during those collective traumatic experiences, they were impacted by that. It impacted their epigenetic structure. And we've inherited it. So just recognizing all these different levels of trauma that is in our system today. The other important thing I'd like to mention is that we are here right now because we can do this work, and anybody who's in a leadership position has the opportunity now to help do this work and help heal the undigested or unprocessed life energy that's still working. It's still moving. It didn't stop. It's still here under the surface, and it's popping up in our world, in addictions, in violence, in child abuse, anything that you can think of. How could people do that? That's where it's coming from. The last thing I want to talk about, I don't know how I'm doing for time here. I have no sense of the time.
You're at 37 minutes.
Perfect. So the last thing I want to talk about is Thomas's collective trauma integration process. And this is something that I've watched Thomas do over the last 3 years, and I'm learning how to do this myself and training facilitators how to help our clients heal these issues. So what we do, with agreement from everybody, they have to sign on to this, is we've got a group of people. These are people, and there's a field. So we've created a field with some specific intention of healing whatever trauma is in that field. So we're all tuning into each other with that process. Before, I told you about our minds and our emotions and our bodies. We tune in with each other and seeing how we're all doing, and recognizing that we're all having an impact on each other, but we're also, as a group, creating a container where that information that's down here in the unconsciousness, we create a container that's safe, and we build our own capacity to hold that energy when it comes in. And it's very uncomfortable. It's a very uncomfortable experience, but the more we do this, the easier it gets. So we just get comfortable with being uncomfortable. We start to take a look at it, and we start to recognize how that energy is showing up in our own nervous systems, and our what is it called? The adaptive child or wounded child that's our nervous system represents starts to feel safe again. So we are now adults. So our adult self is able to hold the pain and suffering of our inner child that was hurt, and help to reparent our own inner child. And we do that in a group. And it's incredible to see how powerful this work is. As we create this field, this there's a space here between conscious awareness. So this is conscious. So there's a space, it's an imaginary line. But what happens is there's this zone of denial. And this zone of denial starts to soften up a bit so more information can come in. And I believe this is what we see is happening already on the planet, is that there's so many people doing mindfulness work or healing practices or just trying to address certain issues on the planet and in relationships, that this place of denial is starting to soften up a little bit. And that allows more and more unconscious energy to come up. I believe, and again, this is my belief, that what's happening in the US right now is coming because we are now ready and able to deal with all of those unconscious traumas that have been sitting under the surface. It's not a surprise, the racism and the Me Too movement, all of the things that are happening, and even the democratic system itself had some shadows in it, is that they're all coming to the surface now because it's time to take a look at them. It's time to take a look at them, and we need to be able to hold this space for ourselves, for our families, for our clients, as consultants, as advisors, as leaders. We need to be able to hold this space and work on our own nervous systems so that we can expand this capacity, so that we can bring in whatever those conflicts are, bring in whatever the disagreements are, and deal with them from our adult self and not react to them from our wounded children. That it's part of all of us. So that's pretty much everything I have, I believe. The last thing I wanted to talk about was actually Ken Wilber. And Ken Wilber has this integral theory. He's been around for several decades. I first was introduced to Ken Wilber's work when I lived in Austria just 20 years ago. And he'd already been around for quite some time. And he has taken something called spiral dynamics and developed it even further. Spiral dynamics is talking about an evolution of human consciousness. So really understanding how we are developing in our level of consciousness and how we see the world and what we think is right and wrong and what's best. And he's taken an exhaustive research around the world over time on different systems and understandings. And he's explaining how we have evolved over time and where we're going to next. So all of this technology that I've shared with you today is very much a part of Ken Wilber's work. And when you see where we are now and where we're going to next, it provides a kind of map. It provides a map to say, this is where we're going. And it's very exciting when you see how it's starting to happen on the planet today. I'm happy to be a part of that and share with other people that map. And let's all work together to create a safer world. The best leadership model, and this is from a colleague down in the Boston area, Xander Grasho, is great parents. So once again, parenting ourselves, but also parenting our clients and parenting our team. It sounds weird, but it's about being an adult. It's about waking up and growing up and showing up in Ken Wilber's terms. So just taking full responsibility for what's going on here. Constantly learning, copying greatness and rejecting lame examples and excuses, evolving at the pace of change. So this is where we are right now, and it's important not to get too far ahead of ourselves. Creating the safety to come home to for ourselves and for others, creating the safety to stray and go out and explore, creating the safety to fail, and having shared values. Those are also really, really critical when you want to be a great leader. So thank you everybody for listening, and I understand that after this recorded session is done, we'll have some live Q&A in the conference on the 21st, and I look forward to hearing any questions and hopefully being able to answer them. Thank you.
Are you an advisor in the agriculture industry? At WellTracks, we understand the importance of surface lease income for many of your farm clients. With leading technology and over 30 years of experience, we're here to help, providing the most accurate accounting of oil and gas assets available. Rely on WellTracks for the information you need in annual tax planning, farm succession, or farm sale. Contact WellTracks and get well connected today.